Welcome to Product Momentum, a community of thought leaders and learners coming together to celebrate the product people who are shaping our way ahead. Inspired by our most pressing questions and insightful guests, we'll explore the challenges you face and offer practical, hands-on guidance your team can implement today. This is Product Momentum. Here are your hosts, Sean Flaherty and Paul Gable.
Sean, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing awesome today. Just had that great conversation. Really pumped to share it with our listeners.
Yeah, Shikha Kapoor. She's wow, what a rock star in our industry. Product leader at Meta. She's been doing AI for before we were even really talking about building it into our product for a very long time.
Yeah, she's living the day to day, and she knows what's coming up next, and had a lot of cool things to talk about.
Yeah, I love how she shared her story with us and talked about how AI is changing the product landscape and what to look out for in the next year, and just really great conversation.
Yeah, if anything, just great journey. Like unbelievable what's possible today, right?
Absolutely. Well, let's get after it. Share this with the audience.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, today we're joined by Shikha Kapoor, an AI product leader and innovator. At Meta, Shikha drives strategy for cutting-edge AI investments, personalizing content for billions of users on Instagram and Facebook. Previously, she led teams at Google, launching key products for their AI assistant. Recognized as a trailblazer in AI, Shikha has consistently developed innovative products across AI, productivity, media, and e-commerce. Shikha is also a seasoned speaker that is passionate about innovation and entrepreneurship. We're so excited to have you today. We're really excited to talk with you just about your experience and what our listeners can learn from you today. We really wanted to start out with kind of like just an idea of how does somebody get to the point from starting their career to becoming a trailblazer in AI?
Yeah, first of all, super excited to be here and happy to talk a little bit about my career journey as well. So, I grew up in a very small town in India, and growing up, I had never used a computer. Forget about AI. AI was clearly not a big buzzword back then. And then I think, but I was passionate about learning, and I think that whole idea of like just staying hungry, staying curious is a principle that has carried me throughout my life, and especially in a space like AI, which is changing so dynamically, so rapidly. You always need to have that student mindset, what I like to call it. So I was really curious, really hungry, and I wanted to learn as much as possible about science and maths. And I think I wanted to go to the best school possible as college to learn those things. And I think that I lived in a very, very small town, so I didn't have access to a lot of education resources. I also didn't have access to internet. I used to go to this primary school, and I remember my teacher talking one day I was in seventh grade, saying that, hey, there are these colleges called the Indian Institutes of Technology, which have the best learning in India around engineering, math, science, and technology. And then I came back home and told my parents that that is where I'm going to study. I didn't even know where that college was or what it took to get there, but that became my dream from that day because of the underlying motivation was to learn and grow. So I worked super hard, got into that college, and I ended up taking computer science without knowing what computer science was. Um, but from there, I think my journey began. I was lucky enough to learn from some of the best and brightest minds, not just in India, but in the world. And then I started my career as a software engineer. I worked for a couple of years as an engineer. And then I realized that what I really wanted to do was to work in cutting edge technologies in Silicon Valley, number one. And number two, I really wanted to tie the dots from business problems to technology solutions. And while talking to people, I came across this field called product management, where like the PM sits at the intersection of engineering, business, and design, and kind of thinks end to end about user needs and where the market is going and what type of solutions do we need to deploy to get there. So that role really fascinated me and aligned with what I was trying to do and where I wanted to be. So I came to the US, I did an MBA in Chicago. And after that, like I was very clear throughout that I wanted to switch to product management because that role aligned more with my interests versus engineering. So I interned as a product manager at Google, and from there, my career as product management manager in the Valley started. So over time, I built products at Google, and now at Meta, I'm doing what I do right now.
Yeah,
Awesome.
even more exciting in your career, all the experience you've had with AI, because we know that's way more than a buzzword anymore. It's like such an important part of our job as product leaders to be thinking about how it's impacting the way in which we build products, the way in which we think about products,
Yeah.
the way in which we in the tools themselves, how we incorporate these technologies into the tools. I'd love to hear about your journey specifically in that space as well.
Yeah, so I think one is like I said that I have background in computer science, and even as a student and later on as an engineer, AI was being like I was working on AI. It just wasn't the coolest thing to be doing around. It was a pretty nascent field at the time. And then I think when I came to Google as a PM, I think I was really excited in, and again, because I had been an entrepreneur in the past, my passion lied in working on building 0 to 1 entrepreneurial deep tech products. At the time at Google, I think there were initiatives happening around AR, VR, and then AI around voice assistants, and then there were other bunch of initiatives going on as well. But I ended up working on AI specifically around voice assistants because I like that is the area that I was most excited about, and I could see how that would transform the user experience of people, how that could kind of really bring in new use cases to the market that didn't exist at the time. For example, like how do you coordinate across your car and your phone and your home to drive end to end user journeys? So it was more, I was driven by curiosity to kind of get that initial foot in the door. And once I got that foot in the door, is when I kind of really started going deep in that space. And I worked with my teams to build a lot of cutting edge innovations, industry first innovations around building those AI voice assistants to the market. How should we think about their privacy? How should we think about their user experience? Which kind of, so just one step led to another, and I kept going deep in that space. But innately, it was driven by curiosity and driven by like this passion of bringing next generation innovations to the market in a way that solve real people problems.
I think that's so interesting. This is your day to day. So like
Yeah.
what can you walk us through like a day to day and of your life as a product leader working on cutting edge AI? Like how do you stay ahead in such a rapidly evolving field?
Yeah, and I think that's part of the thrill or excitement is that this field is evolving so rapidly, and there's always something to catch up on. So I think my day to day varies in a greatly and by the week as well as by quarter. So at Meta, for example, we do what we call as we plan for like the next 6 months, and then we kind of drive like longer term vision and strategy for an area like AI. And we work backwards from there on. Okay, if this is where we want to be by 2026 or 2027, then working backwards from there, where do we need to be for the next 6 months? So I think at those times of the year, I'm involved a lot in my with my teams on like planning for the next 6 months. What should we build? What milestones should we drive? How do we validate those hypotheses? And then like what success measures do we drive, right? And then there are other phases of my time where I am focused more on super long term vision, like here's where the industry is going, here's where the trends are going, here's where our differentiators lie as a company, and here's where our users see gaps in the current experience based on what user research is telling us. So how do you marry what the users want and what do you have as a company, as a product, as your differentiating assets based on your knowledge on where the market is going, to kind of devise the next stage of your vision or the next product offering you're trying to build. So that's more of like a long-term vision brainstorming mode that I engage with my teams on.
Okay. How does 6-month planning work out in something that's moving so fast? Like what are the biggest disruptors that you're seeing in these 6-month cycles?
Yeah, so I think basically the idea here is to be as organized as well as nimble as possible.
Okay.
So I think basically it's really about, I think in a space like this, it's more important to have to start from first principles and to have clear hypotheses that we are planning to validate, and not get too attached to the specific solution because the technology is evolving so fast that the solution will be changing before you know it. So I think you need to have some solution to work with, but then you also have to be open to that it can get disrupted very quickly. So you have to kind of figure out what is the right invariant that is not going to change as the underlying technology changes. For example, here's the specific user problem we are solving, and here's how we will know, here's how we will measure that when that problem is solved, like that certain metric needs to go up, or users need to tell us in some user research that now their experience has gotten better. Those things are independent of the underlying technology changing, right? So you have to have a north star like that, and then within that, then you have to have a basket of potential AI based solutions that can drive you to that end outcome. And you have to be very flexible about those solutions changing as the technology evolves or as you learn more as you deploy those solutions.
What does that mean for you in your day to day? What does it mean to stay curious and to stay, open minded?
That's a good question. I think that one is really acknowledging, and I think I have to remind myself every day that what we are building and what we are seeing right now as a collective, like as a community of technologists, as well as myself personally, is really just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Like whatever we thought was the best, groundbreaking, earth shattering next big thing 4 or 5 years ago is extremely mundane and almost outdated, definitely outdated today, right? Or what
Yeah.
we thought would be extremely hard to build in a like a any sort of a practical or acceptable ROI acceptable fashion a few years ago is like run of the mill today and super easy to do. So I think like constantly grounding yourself in um, the assumptions you are making for any assertion you are making, right? Like for example, if I say that something will take 6 months to build, or something has a certain level of complexity, or doing something um, is has is hard in a certain way, there are underlying assumptions behind what I am saying, and
Mhm.
constantly being aware of them and questioning them, that 2 3 months or 6 months down the line, do those assumptions still hold true, or have there been new innovations, or has the market shifted in a way that we need to question those assumptions, is very very important. um, I think I'm lucky enough that I work at a place like Meta, where like I work with some of the best and the brightest AI researchers in the world. So that definitely helps me stay both humble as well as curious, because I think I'm really surrounded by people who are super smart, super knowledgeable, and constantly in my everyday interactions, I'm learning from them all the time. But I think like really grounding myself and my team on constantly what are our assumptions here, and do those assumptions still hold true with everything that's happening in the industry is like key to staying curious.
That's awesome. You've spoken about this kind of philosophy around like the importance of owning what makes you unique. How'd you discover this way of thinking and working? And what are like some examples that you can provide us of where this has been really important?
Yeah, so I think I was lucky enough. So my role model is my or one of my role models is my grandmom, and at the time, when she was young and she was a student, she was growing up in an environment where, for example, girls were not even allowed to go to college. And then she came to India as a refugee, and she set up like one of the earliest primary schools in my town. And then she had to go door to door to like tell people to send their kids to school. And like that school became later one of the most successful schools in the city. And like over her lifetime, she's educated 70 to 80,000 students and changed their lives. Um, so I think growing up around her, I was around somebody who lived a very unconventional life. I'm sure when she was going through those things as a young person, I wasn't around, but I've heard stories, and I can also guess that she would have had a lot of pushback, or she was trying to do a lot of things that were not the norm of the society around at that time. But she went ahead and did those anyway because she believed those were the right things to do. And I think those were kind of the values that I grew up with as well. And I've kind of followed them through both in my personal as well as professional choices. Like, for example, like I said, I started my career as an engineer, but then like I very quickly knew that my strengths lied in something a little bit broader, and I didn't really have name to give to that, and I wasn't really aware that product management was a thing. But I did not just give up on it. Like I wasn't like, oh, I don't know how to chase this thing, so let me just keep doing this thing that I don't think my biggest strengths or passions lie with. I chased down that curiosity path. I talked to people. I started figuring out what else is out there. And then slowly I kind of bumped into people who were telling me about, hey, there's this thing called product management, and maybe that's more what's more aligned with where you want to be and where you want to go. And like I followed that path, right? So I think it's really about when each of us have those moments when you feel that you're trying to do something that is not the norm,
Yeah.
that is not what everybody else around you is doing. It's really important to not give up on your instinct and your belief and your intuition. And that doesn't mean you will always be right, but I think you owe it to yourself to at least give it a fair, like, how do I say, a fair investigation. It also doesn't mean you go and try every single idea that you have and you fail at all of those things. I think that also doesn't work. But at least you entertain everything you strongly believe in, and you try to do your honest homework around it and honest investigation around it, and like believe in yourself that much to kind of chase that. And then some of those things you will end up giving up at a very early stage. Some of those things you'll dig in a little bit deeper and you may fail, and then you may have to pivot. It's kind of very similar to what we do at work as well. Like I was telling you, we build all these bunch of AI solutions, and things are changing so quickly. Some things fail quickly, some things we spend a lot of time on and they still fail, and some things really succeed. But I think it's important to not give up on those convictions, and that's like the spirit of innovation.
Yeah, your grandmother sounds like an incredible human being.
She
Big
was.
market world. Yeah, wow. And sounds like a lot of that rubbed off on you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm very proud that I'm her granddaughter.
Convention, I heard you say something along the lines of convention doesn't breed innovation. Like you can't, it doesn't breed creativity. If you follow the same path that everybody else followed and you do the same things everyone else is doing, that doesn't leave a whole lot of space for creativity. And in our role in this job as a product leader, we're responsible for producing something new and different in the world, something that did not exist yesterday. Like we're constantly reinventing what it is we're doing and trying to learn what the market needs. And convention isn't going to get us there. You know, there's certain things that are learned. I think it was Einstein that said, "It's creativity. It's what we know is finite, but what creativity does is it encircles the world. It's what gives us a better possible future." And that's our job, right? Is to tap into that creativity and make a change, shake up the world a little bit, make a change where there wasn't, make something better than there was before, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also heard you say that to stay ahead, you have to plan ahead. So I saw a poster somewhere about dreaming in years and planning in, executing in weeks, and planning in weeks and executing in days. But you have to look out broader at the bigger picture if you're going to head somewhere productive and valuable in the world. And there's this balance that we need to achieve between innovation and execution that's sometimes hard in this role. I think that's one of the hardest things we do in this role. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that, again, like I said, that the type of spaces that I work on, very, very 0 to 1, very, very fast moving. It's more of, like I said, you have to have a long-term vision, and then you have to break it down into manageable phases or steps towards the vision. Now, will you get it right? Not precisely. The map, like the directions will change based on how the technology is evolving, as well as what you learn as data points along the way on your earlier phases. But I think it is still important to have that, to constantly then refresh it, and then to bring everybody on the same page when you kind of refresh it, right? So, for example, let's say you have a 3-year vision, and then you break it down into the longer the time frame, you can be more high level. Like on the third year at a high level, this is what we are gonna do. Then step back on the second year, this what gonna do. Then step back. Then this year, this where you have to be far more detailed because that's what's guiding what your teams and your engineers are working on every single day. It's
Yeah.
like next 6 months, this what we'll do. And based on these results of these tests we are going to run, the 6 months after that, this what that would look like. So it's kind of like almost like a flow chart. So it's like the 6 months after the current 6 months are dependent on what you learn in the current 6 months, right? Like some things may pan out, some things may not pan out. The market itself may change and you may have to pivot some of the directions. So at any point of time, like I think we, at least for the next few months, it's very important to have a very detailed and very granular view of what your team is doing, what hypothesis is your team testing, what does success on testing those hypotheses look like, what will change in terms of user experience on any other metrics or whatever success measures you may be tracking. And what does failure mean? It doesn't mean all those hypotheses should pan out. But if something fails, then what are you gonna do? Do you shut down that part of the project? Do you pivot it to something else? So kind of having that ongoing view and constantly tying it to that 3 year or whatever North Star that you have. Hopefully that North Star doesn't change. But as you're learning these things, you are changing things around in your execution. And then you're constantly bringing your team along on how does that new view based on what we have learned still align towards our North Star?
I want to dive a little bit more into like what's coming, right? So with your experience at companies like Google and Meta, you're seeing AI being applied in project management or product management in real time. What are some trends that we should expect to see in 2025? And like, how can our listeners prepare for what's next?
I think things are changing very quickly. I'm very excited about it. Taking a step outside my day to day work in general, broadly, I think AI is disrupting every industry. And I am actually personally really excited about how much AI is disrupting some of the, how do I say it, more traditional industries. Like, for example, recently I was working with a lawyer on something, and they were telling me how much they are using generative AI tools in some of their day to day work. And, like, how do they ensure that like those tools still stay privacy compliant and things like that. And it was really heartening for me to see for some of these industries around, like, for example, medicine or legal or, sales or retail. There's a lot of things that happen right now that are very intensive manual work, right? Like, and I think that there is immense headroom there for huge disruption. And it's been super heartening to see in broadly, like us, like we are finally at a point where we can massively disrupt some of those workflows and generally help people and professionals be far more productive and far more effective than they've ever been. So I'm really excited about that. And I think as part of Meta, for example, some of the open source work we are doing is like those are the type of things that I'm very excited about that will enable this broader innovation in the industry as well.
Outstanding. So from someone at the cutting edge of all this wild and amazing technology, what are you learning? What are you reading these days? If you could recommend a book to our audience, what would it be?
Well, I think in terms of work, I read a bunch of papers related to my work and like the areas I work on. I'll share offline. I think one of the technologies my team works on, we recently published a paper as well. So I'll share offline if your readers are interested in reading that.
Awesome.
More broadly, I think I really like reading nonfiction. And like going back to the curiosity thread, I like to read about a bunch of things that are totally unrelated to my work because I think overall you are one person and all of those threads kind of add up to make you who you are and make you how you think. So I'm recently reading Outlive. And I've heard amazing things about that book. And that book talks about what are the aspects of our personal health and well-being that we should think about so that we don't just have a long life, we have a long fit life where you are not just extending your lifespan but you are also extending your health span. And those are some of the areas I'm very interested in general, and like I'm very fascinated by. So I'm really excited about that book that I'm reading these days.
That's a great recommendation. I do think there's a tremendous amount of merit in making sure you keep your brain sharp and mixing in some fun, some fiction, some things like that, so that you're not too unilaterally focused on one thing. It's good. It's good for the brain.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If I were to ask you to define innovation, how would you do that?
Well, I think I read an idiom many, many years ago where it was like necessity is the mother of invention. I still kind of stand by it. I think the right type of innovation is something that solves a real user problem.
I love that. I love that. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Shikha. This is a great interview. This was a good time.
Yeah,
think-
thank you. Super, like, this was awesome. And thanks for taking the time to chat.
Yeah, our audience is going to enjoy it. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks.
All right.
Well, that's it for today. In line with our goals of transparency and listening, we really want to hear from you. Sean and I are committed to reading every piece of feedback that we get, so please leave a comment or a rating wherever you're listening to this podcast. Not only does it help us continue to improve, but it also helps the show climb up the rankings so that we can help other listeners move, touch, and inspire the world just like you're doing. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next episode.